Okay, so today we're going to talk about automating data flow between Unanet and other systems. Unanet has a very robust integration capability. Basically, it allows you to exchange data between any other system that you can export data from or import data into and Unanet. So if you've got your accounting system or maybe your payroll or HR system or some other system out there and you want to pull data into Unanet, you can export the data into one of our file formats, which we're going to talk about today, and you can import that data into Unanet. Also, you can export any data out of Unanet into just about any format that your other system requires and import data into that other system. So what types of data can be imported and exported into and out of Unanet? Many, many items. So depending on what situation you're in and what you need to do, you can import and export any of these items into Unanet. So for example, if you're integrating with QuickBooks and you want to send time and expense to that system so that you can create an accounts payable or keep track of your time, you can do that. If you're integrating with Deltek and you want to send your project labor categories from Deltek to Unanet, you can do that. So all of the items that you see on the screen can be imported, and most of the items that you see on the screen can be exported. Obviously, there's some data constraints when importing, which we're going to talk about now. The Unanet data entities can be added, updated, and deleted via the import functionality. So many people will actually export data from Unanet so that they can make changes to it and re-import. So that's another possibility. The import is a standard comma-separated value. So if you create a template of data that you'd like to import into Unanet, you create it in Excel or you dump it from another system, you can save it as a CSV, and then that data will be importable. We also can import TXT files, but the preferred method of import is a CSV. Okay. The layout of each type of import is going to vary depending on which data element you're importing. And there's a complete list of the file formats in our help documentation that I'm going to show you in the live demonstration that follows this PowerPoint. So as I mentioned earlier, the import functionality can be used in conjunction with the export functionality to do mass updates to your Unanet data. How do the exports work? Exports can be used to retrieve data from the Unanet system. We have a standard set of exports that come with Unanet in the form of an import template. Those include people, projects, organizations, all of those items that you saw on the previous screen. When you export that data, it's already in the format for import. However, we also have the ability to create additional export templates in any one of those formats to match whatever layout your other system may have for import. Okay? So, as I mentioned, the output is configurable via our template screen. The output can be either a CSV or fixed formatted file, so depending on what the requirements of your downstream system are, we can attempt to meet them via these file formats. And again, it can be used along with the import to do mass updates into Unanet. So what are the file format requirements for importing data? Okay, the data must be, in the exact field order sequence defined in our help page in order to import data into Unanet, or you must use the appropriate column header tag to import data. So for example, if you're importing a person file and you just want to import, maybe you just want to update everyone's hire date, you don't necessarily have to have every column that's in our export template when you export people. But you would have to tag the fields that you're going to update, and you would also have to include any required fields. So when you're using the column header tag approach, you have to make sure that the first character of that header row has an asterisk in front of it. And we're going to demonstrate this in the live demonstration in just a few minutes. You also have to note which fields in the import are always required. In our help documentation, we note for every column in the import format which fields are always required, conditionally required, or optional. Okay, we also mentioned the field lengths and other information, which I'll show you when we get to the live demonstration. This is just a note that if you don't want to import information for a non-required field, you can just leave that field blank. Obviously, then any data that is already existing in Unanet would remain there. The file to import must be saved in comma delimited format. As I mentioned, you also could save it as a TXT file, but this is the file format that we prefer. And if you enclose any fields in double quotes, that will eliminate the possibility of fields being separated into separate columns. So, for example, for those of you familiar with comma-separated files, if you have a comma, obviously that indicates that you're the end of a field and the beginning of a new field. So if you want to have a first name, comma, last name, for example, you can put that in quotes with the comma in there and it will come in as one field. Okay. Also, you can include comments in your import files. Many of you probably don't know that, but if you're exporting, maybe you've created a SQL script or something in another system and you've got some comments to let you know what's going on in certain rows of the field, you can actually comment them out by putting a # and those rows will be ignored in the import logic. Okay. Also, many of our imports include special tags where you can update information, rename fields, clear fields out, or delete fields. So, for example, if I wanted to change all of my org codes, as many of you have learned, maybe even the hard way, when you go to import a project, list of all projects, and you want to change an org code, the org code and the project code are actually married. So to change the org code, you could use our rename command. You could say rename org 01 to 04, whatever you wanted to rename to. Also, maybe you have a field like person code that contains all of your employee ID numbers and you're switching to a new accounting system and you want to change them all. You could use our blank command to import your people and blank out that field so that there would then be nothing in there. Okay? Each import type has a corresponding export template which matches the layout as I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to demonstrate that when we get to the live demonstration. So a little bit more about the export templates. Only administrators can create export templates, so you must have the Unanet administrator role in order to do that. One of the questions that just came through, and it's a very good question, is if the import data is meant to replace data, does it give an option to replace or does it simply overwrite the old data? It simply overwrites the old data. So if I was updating a field that was a non-required field and I wanted to change, for example, everyone's first name in the import, I would simply export my data, export my person record, change the first name, and re-import it, and it would update everyone's first name to whatever was in my import file. Good question. So only people with the administrative role can create export templates, and in the export template, that is where they will define the type of output, whether it's going to be CSV or fixed format. They also can define several other attributes like have it emailed, what they want the name of the template to be. They establish the field layout and the sorting options so that when you're exporting data, what sort of data is looked at first, you know, that sort of thing. The fields also have a powerful set of expressions that you can choose from. And I'm going to show you this when we get to the live demonstration. Our help documentation lists all of the expressions that can be used in the export template. What is an expression? An expression is an if statement, a switch command, a case statement. So if I wanted to say, you know, in my export template, if the person's first name starts with E, place a value of X in this field. Those are the types of things that you can do using the expressions. Or if the project type is contract, place the word direct in this field. Then it will do that for you. Okay? So we're going to review them in the live demonstration, but there are many, many expressions that can be used. There's also string operators. Many times when you're sending to a downstream system, You may want to concatenate data or maybe just take the first few characters of data. So, for example, many of you probably integrate with an accounting system that requires accounting codes. Maybe in Unanet, you have a 4-digit dash 3-digit code, and when you're sending it to your downstream system, you just want the first 4 digits. You can substring digits 1 through 4 of everything that you're exporting. Same with concatenating. There are also numeric operators, so you can do math. You can add, you can subtract, you can multiply, you can put things in numeric formats. As I prematurely stated, the formatting options are things like date. You can have date formats if you need things to be month, month, day, day, year, year. Number formats, so if you need a certain number of decimals, that can be formatted in these export templates. So they're very, very flexible with what you have the ability to do inside the export template. And we're going to take a look at one in just a few minutes in the live demonstration. So there are 3 options to initiate an import or an export. The first one is the user interface. You can simply, through the user interface, import data and you can export data. Whether you export it from one of our standard templates or you create your own custom export template that's going to go to QuickBooks or Deltek or wherever you need it to go, that can be done via the user interface. Okay. You can use what we call the command line import. The command line import, we're going to talk about each one of these in detail in a few slides, but the command line import is a way for you to, through a batch file, extract data from Unanet or import data into Unanet. And we're going to review exactly how to do that and what exactly a command line import is. But basically it's a glorified batch file that can have different commands in it to tell Unanet what to do with your data when it comes in or when it exports. The latest and greatest way to initiate an import or export is the integrated management utility. This is something that was recently developed a little over a year ago by one of our developers, and it is basically the command line import on steroids. It has the ability to, as it's importing or exporting data, send emails, generate logs, store day-over-day history of what's coming in and what's going out with errors. So it's a really nice utility for you to use, and it can even be used to export data to another system, have some modification done to the data, and then import the data back in. So we're going to do some examples of all of these today when we get to the demonstration, but I want to kind of go over in detail how it works. So option 1, using the user interface. You know, you've got Unanet sitting over here, and you want to be able to import data to the system. You could also export data from the system. They work the same way. But over here you've got your external system, so this might be QuickBooks or Deltek or some other Solomon, some other system that you have that you need to get data from that system to Unanet or from Unanet to that system. You simply import or export using a CSV file. So you either export your data from your system into a CSV file and import it into Unanet, or you export data from Unanet to a CSV file and you import it into your external system. The second option, the command line import, same situation. You've got Unanet sitting over here and you need to import or export data to it, and you've got your accounting system sitting over here and you need to get data from or to it. Basically, it's the same methodology. You create a CSV file, and that file is going to be brought into Unanet, but instead of you manually pulling it in, it's pulled in by what we call the command line import, which can be scheduled using Windows Scheduler. I'm going to demonstrate that in the live demonstration, but that's exactly how it works. So your data can come into Unanet using the command line import, or it can be extracted from Unanet using the command line import and then imported into your other system. Okay. Option 3, the interface management utility. Again, the same basics. You've got Unanet here and you've got your external accounting system here. Basically, the eMove sits on top of the entire process, and several command line exports or imports, these could be either, will sit out there that will produce a file, and this process will send the file downstream. It checks for errors. It can even send email notifications. It can send email notifications letting you know what the errors are, or it can just send you email notifications to let you know that the process has run. So what many people will do, if you're bidirectionally integrating with another system, and we do this with many systems, you will have this integrated management utility scheduled to run one or maybe several times a day, and it'll be scheduled to send you an email to let you know that it's run successfully. Any errors, if there were any, when the data was processed into Unanet would appear in the error logs, or when the data was processed out of Unanet would appear in the error logs. Okay. And this does store the logs day over day so that you can actually see what happened each day, all of the input files, the error logs, all of the data, including runtime logs. And you have the ability in the configuration of this integrated management utility to purge older data files that you no longer wish to store, to save space. Again, this is always, well, this can be scheduled. Both the command line import and the interface management utility can be scheduled or can be kicked off manually. Just something to note. Okay. So I want to go through some real world examples because obviously that was very technical, and how are you really going to use each of these. I'm going to talk about them here in the PowerPoint presentation, but then I'm going to do a demonstration of each one of those options when we do our live demonstration. So the first example here is a company wants the payroll administrator to be the alternate timesheet user for all employees. Why? I don't know, but they do. How can you do that? You could export a formatted file, so create an export template in Unanet that includes all of the users in your system and then the username of the payroll administrator, and then re-import that data using our person alternate template. So that's a good example that I'm going to use to demonstrate option one, which is our manual import-export, and I'm going to show you how that will work. The second one that we're going to use to demonstrate the command line import is this example. A company doesn't want a project manager to mistype account codes or other data that's kept in the accounting system, but they want to give them visibility to see the data. So over in the other system, there are, let's say, account codes. What you can do is create an uneditable user-defined field inside of Unanet that can be viewed by the project manager but not changed. Then you export a formatted file from your accounting system that includes the data you wish for them to view, and this can either be an export that you do manually, or it can be an export that is in some way automated. And then you use our command line import to either manually kick off the import of this data, or it can be scheduled to kick off the import of this data into Unanet. That could go off every day so that if you added new accounts or new account numbers, to any of your Unanet projects, the PMs would be able to see them. The example we're going to use for the integrated management utility is comp time. This comes up with a lot of clients. They need to be able to have a budget of accrued comp time for certain users, maybe even all their users. So in this example, a company has a project in Unanet called comp time accrued, and whenever time is charged to this code, they want that time to create a budget of hours on another project that the user can use. Okay, so how can we do that? Well, we can create an export template for the comp time that will export any time charged to the comp time accrued project in the format of an assignment that can then be re-imported back into Unanet as a budget on the comp time on the other comp time project. So the import would result in an assignment budget that was exported using the EMU and then re-imported using the EMU. And what we would probably do is schedule this process to run each evening so that this was running completely behind the scenes. Again, both the command line import and the integrated management utility can either be kicked off manually or they can be automated. Most times the integrated management utility is automated, and many times the command line import is also automated, but just so you know, you can kick it off manually. Okay, so we'll come back to how you can get help after we do the live demonstration, but without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and go into my instance of Unanet that I have open here. And before we get started with option 1, I want to go ahead and show you that inside of our help documentation, and I'm just coming up here to the right-hand corner and clicking on help, you can search for any of our template formats by, I'm going to type in the word import here. And over here, you'll see many of our import templates over here. Import time, import expenses, import projects, people. Go ahead and click on people because I want to show you that each one of these import templates defines the file record layout that is required for bringing data into Unanet. So when importing data into Unanet, obviously each row here describes a column of the CSV file that will be imported. So in this example, when you're importing people, you have your username, which is, as you can see here, always required. First name, last name, middle initial. So these are all of the things that are, all of the fields that are available in the person import. So all the data that's in Unanet can be exported, changed, and re-imported. Okay. As you can see, it'll tell you which ones are always required and which ones are just required when you're adding a new user. And it'll also tell you which commands can be used. So in this example, the username, you could rename someone's username if you wanted to. You could blank out the middle initial by using the blank command here. You could delete if the user obviously hadn't been used. There is a delete command somewhere in here. Here it is. Where if you use this command, it will delete all the records in there. Obviously, if the user has already created timesheets, they won't be allowed to be deleted, and there's a note here about that. So this gives you a lot of information about exactly what is required when you're importing this data. Okay? Okay, the other thing that I want to show you is with respect to exporting the data, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type into the search command expressions, because what we were talking about is when you're creating an export template, you use many expressions. So if you type expression into our search, you will come up with all the export expressions here, where here they are listed. And inside of here, there are actually examples of each one. So as well as, I'm just going to scroll down a little bit here, a little sample export template so that you can see here in this export template, there's, an automated header, which means it'll automatically label each header in this file. But then here, just the file formats of some of the simple, simpler expressions, like a case statement. I want the, if the pay code equals regular time, put the word salary. If the pay code equals overtime, put overtime pay. I want the default to be salary, that sort of thing. And up here are a complete list of the expressions where if you drill down on them, you can see, in this one, for example, the exact format that it should be in. So in this example, if the amount is less than 10, ignore the record. That means don't include it in the exported data. Otherwise, put the amount here. Okay. Also there, as I said, are substrings, all types of different information that you can, here it is, substring, that you can, all sort of different expressions that you can use to get the data that you need from Unanet to your other system. Okay, so this is a great way to look at it. Okay, so back to Unanet, and this just opened, as all of you know, your help document opens in a new tab, so you can actually keep this open while you're creating export templates if you want to be able to copy and just drop things into your export template. Okay. So in my first example, this is where we're going to use option 1, the manual export of data to change some information and re-import. This is where the company wants the payroll administrator to be the alternate timesheet user for all of the employees. So what they need to do is they need to create an export template by going to Admin, Export. And as you can see, I have a ton of export templates here that can be used. Okay, but what I've done is under the People section, I created a People template called Alternates for Timesheet User. and I'm just going to pencil into this so you can see how I configured it. This is an extremely basic template. The template that you're looking at here has no headers. All it's doing is giving me every required field for import of our alternates. So if I were to look up the file format for alternates to import alternates, I would see that there are only 4 fields required: username, alternate username, role, and delete. So those 4 fields are over here: username, alternate for username, role, and delete. And then over here, I have placed in the cell the value that I wish to send. So what I've done here is I wanted Unanet admin to be the alternate user for every person. This is person username is every person username in my entire system, and I want to give them the alternate role of timesheet user. Okay, so I can pencil into these, and I can change them. I can add logic. I can do whatever I want. One thing I want to point out about this is I don't have to remember these field names here, and I can also double click on a row, which I'm going to go ahead and do to show you. I might not know that person username was the right syntax for the field that I was trying to pull. So where do I get it from? I can click on this field expression chooser here, and this allows me to choose from a list of fields. By looking at the field selector here, I can see all of the fields available to me in the person export to choose from. So there's person username, and that's where I got it from. You can see that there's user-defined fields. There's, you know, all types of information, but that's how I got the person username. I didn't just remember that. The other thing I wanted to point out there, in the field expression chooser, there are some sample expressions. So if you're mid-template and you're not looking at the help documentation, you can actually choose from some of the more common expressions here. So for example, I wanted to use a substring, or I wanted to show a bill rate with 2 decimals, or I wanted to do some math. You know, it'll show me here how to do it. Like, for example, math, multiplication. If I pull that, it says math, math, and then I would put in whatever value I wanted here, like maybe timesheet cell hours times 2, that sort of thing. Let me delete that. So back to person username. You would just simply save, and that saved it. So in our example, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to export this data. So I would just run this, hit the Run Export button, and there it lists, as you can see, every single user in my system, and I'm going to be making Unanet admin the alternate for all of them. Simply download the file, and I can just save it wherever it is I want to save it. Not really sure where that went. There it is. So I'm just going to stick that right on my desktop. Oh. Do it that way then. Oh, there it is. There we go. And then inside of Unanet, I could simply come over here to the import button, so admin, import, and I could manually say, I'm going to bring in that export template here. I want it, you know, as an alternate for all of the users that are in there. Simply go grab that file right off of my desktop. And when I do, one thing I want to point out here is the output options. By default, when I bring this in, it's only going to show me if there's an error. It's going to suppress all warnings and informational messages. If I want to see, you know, just errors and warnings, I could check this box. Or if I want to see all errors, warnings, and informational messages, I can check the all box when I'm bringing it in. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it on all so that you can see what's going to happen. And this file should have both errors, warnings, and informational messages, hopefully, when I bring it in. So here we are. At the bottom, it will sum up what happened for you. So as you can see here, 36 records came in, 8 were ignored, meaning there was no change, 8 were rejected due to some problem, and there was a total of 52 in the file. So Up here, as you scroll up, you can actually see what's going on. You know, this one will tell you this user does not currently have the timesheet user role, so you can't make someone an alternate for them. Well, that just makes sense now, doesn't it? And as you scroll up, you'd see if there were any other informational messages. Here's another, you're inputting a file with no header, so we're assuming that it's the default order of the columns, and so on and so forth. If you do this, this means that all of the records that you see here, all the lines that are in green, have been successfully updated. However, if you wanted to download just the 8 that were rejected, you can simply hit the download the error file here, and you can open it up with Excel. And it'll be just those 8 records. So if I needed to go in and just give those 8 users the timesheet user role so that I could make Unanet admin their alternate, I could go in and do that and then just re-import just these 8 records. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Okay. So what does that do for me in Unanet? Now if I go and I look at my people, most of my people, I'm clicking on people list, and then down here, for those of you that don't know this, you can see who their alternates are by saying show alternates, and I would be able to list all of my people and anyone who was their alternate. So in this case, I can see that now Unanet admin is the alternate for all of these other users. And then down here, all of these users have Unanet admin as their alternate. Okay? So that was number 1. That was an example of just the manual export and re-import of data. The next thing I'm going to talk about, and these do get more technical as I go on, is the command line import and export. The command line import and export, there's information in our help documentation that you can look up on command line where it will show you command line import, command line export. I'm going to go ahead and focus on this one. It will show you all of the requirements and even some examples of what the command line export data should entail. But I'm going to show you live here how to create one. Basically, under my integration folder here, I've created a command line export and a command line import. I'm going to focus on this command line import. This is basically just a batch file that I created. So basically, I created a text file with some information in it, and I saved it as a .bat. That allows it to be kicked off by this import jar. So the way you do this is you go to the Unanet support site, and there's several ways to get there. You can simply go to www.unanet.com and click on support there, or right from your admin dashboard, there is a little contact us link. I can simply click there, and it'll take me right into the Unanet site where I can go to services and downloads. Most of you that are on this call are probably relatively technical and have a login into our support site. If you don't, you can request one right here, and they will send it to you. You simply put in your email and your password, and you'll be brought to the download screen. Many of you are already aware of this because you're already downloading per diems, anything else that you need, previous builds, documents, and training. But here, under the Interfaces tab, is where you can find our import and export jar. The main thing about creating a command line import is they use these import and export jar files to bring the data in. So you simply download it by clicking on the import jar and saving the file, and you can just save it to your desktop or wherever it is you need to save it. You'll just want to put it in the same folder that this command line import is going to be in. Okay? So I'm just going to right-click on this command line import and edit it in Notepad so you can see what it looks like. And basically I copied a lot of this out of our help documentation because I certainly didn't know these commands off the top of my head. But basically this is saying, you know, I'm going to set where this command line import is located, you know, the URL of my instance of Unanet, the credentials, you know, that I'm going to be using to log in, and then I'm going to be using this import functionality of the import jar. Then down here I'm basically just telling it what I'm going to be importing. and down here it'll tell me I'm going to import a project CSV and a project test CSV. What I'm going to do, just like anything else, if you're used to using Unanet properties or you're used to using batch files, this file right now is commented out. I'm going to go ahead and uncomment that one and comment my test one because obviously I want this to be very better demonstration for you. And so basically this is saying I want to import a file called project CSV that is in a file folder called Files from Accounting System. So back to what our example is. In the command line import example, we have a company who maybe doesn't want the project manager to mistype accounts, so or any other data that's kept in the accounting system, but they still want them to have visibility to do this. So what they did is inside of Unanet, they created a user-defined field by going to Admin, Setup, and under the user-defined fields on the project record, they created a user-defined field called Uneditable Account Code from Accounting System. When you do this, the user-defined fields inside of Unanet can be enabled or disabled. So that means if I say this, I want to show it, but I want to show it as disabled, that means the user can see it, but they can't edit it. Okay? But this gives you a way to store that account code that I don't want them to edit in Unanet and for them to view it without being able to make any changes. So I go ahead and I create that and I save it, and this will create, as I said, on the project record for any project in the other tab, a blank field here that says uneditable account code from accounting system. So nothing there. Okay. So then I would, from my other system, in this example, I'm getting a dump, maybe every evening, maybe whenever I feel like it, that is going to be stored into a folder that is called, in this case, it is called Files from Accounting Systems. And there's my file right there. It's called Project CSV. I'm going to go ahead and open this so you can see it. And over here in the user-defined field 8, I've got a project code that I want to pull into Unanet. So in this example, this file will be exported from your other system by some automated process. Whether that automated process is kicked off by Unanet or not is irrelevant in this example, but you've got another process that's kicking off a file and it's placing it there. So let me go ahead and say that. So then all you have to do is, if you were manually going to kick off this command line, you would simply double click on this command line import batch file, or you could, let me make sure it's closed here real quick, or you could drop it into opening a command prompt and drop this file name into there. Of course, you'd have to be in the right directory. I'm just going to do it the simple way and double click on this, and it'll tell me what's going on. And now all of that data that's in this file has been imported into Unanet. So if I come over here to that project I was just looking at, hopefully I had one in there for it, and I refresh, now I'll see that there's an account number in the uneditable account code from my accounting system. So that command line is up so that it can be double multiple users of your